Let me tell you something that nobody in your life ever sat down and explained to you. Getting to your first $100,000 is not just hard. It is the single hardest financial thing you will ever do. Harder than saving your first million. Harder than buying a house. Harder than paying off debt. And I don't mean emotionally hard, although it is that too. I mean mathematically, mechanically, structurally hard. The game is literally rigged against you at the start. And here's the part that makes it worse. Most people quit right before the math flips in their favor. They spend years grinding, watching their account barely move, and they decide it isn't working. They stop, they spend the money, and they never find out that they were 3 feet from gold. Today, I want to show you exactly why that first chunk of money is so brutal, and why the second $100,000 almost builds itself. Because once you understand the mechanics of what's actually happening, quitting becomes a lot harder to justify. If you have ever stared at your investment account after 6 months of being disciplined, skipping dinners out, ignoring the new iPhone, telling yourself, future me will thank you, and thought this is pointless, you are not weak. You are not bad with money. You are just experiencing something that is completely normal and almost never explained. Here is what is actually happening. When your portfolio is small, and I mean under $20,000, $30,000, your contributions are doing almost all of the work. The market is technically growing your money, but the numbers are so small, you can barely feel it. You invest $5,000, you get a solid 10% return. Congratulations, you made $500. You could have skipped a few takeout orders and saved the same amount without ever touching the stock market. At this stage, you are the engine. Every single dollar that shows up in your account came from your own paycheck, your own discipline, your own sacrifice. The market is basically a passenger, and that is exhausting because humans are not built to sacrifice today for a reward that won't show up for years. So people quit. And honestly, given what they can see, it makes sense. The tragedy is what they can't see yet. Now, let me show you exactly what changes at $100,000. Because it is not magic, it is just math. And it is genuinely shocking when you see it laid out. At $10,000 invested, a 7% return gives you $700 in a year. At $50,000, that same return gives you $3,500. Not bad, getting somewhere. But at $100,000, that 7% hands you $7,000. In 1 year, without you doing a single thing. Think about that for a second. $7,000. For a lot of people, especially people who are early in their careers, grinding side hustles, watching every dollar, $7,000 is more than they can physically save in an entire year. And at $100,000, the market is just handing it to you. That is the moment where you stop being the engine and your money starts being the engine. You have essentially hired someone who works every single day, never calls in sick, never asks for a raise, and just quietly adds thousands to your account while you sleep. It gets better from there. The gap between $100,000 and $200,000. That might take you 5 years instead of 8. Between $200,000 and $300,000, maybe 3 years. By the time you are at serious numbers, you are adding $100,000 to your net worth every couple of years just by staying invested and doing nothing dramatic. This is the snowball, and the reason it matters so much is that you have to get the snowball moving before gravity can do its job. That first push, that brutal, slow, demoralizing first push, that is what everything else depends on. Here is the part that nobody talks about. Because the math problem is bad enough on its own, but there is a psychological layer on top of it that makes this phase feel like an actual meat grinder. When you are starting from zero, you are usually also at the lowest point of your income. Early career, maybe dealing with student loans. Rent that feels like it was designed to humiliate you. Every dollar you save feels like a dollar you are physically removing from your quality of life. Because it is. You are not just investing. You are delaying your life, and your account isn't big enough yet to give you any signal that it's working. You check it after a year, and it's up a few $100s. You could have made that in a weekend picking up extra shifts. So your brain runs the math and says, this is not rational. I could spend that money and feel it right now. And here is the really sneaky part. You start telling yourself a story. I'm not a money person. This is too slow. I'll figure this out when I make more. And that story becomes the reason you stop. Not the math, not the market, the story. The people who break through to $100,000 are not smarter. They are not luckier. They just figured out, usually the hard way, that the discomfort of the early years is not a sign that something is wrong. It is a sign that the machine is working exactly the way it's supposed to. So, what actually gets you there? What separates the people who push through from the people who tap out? It's not finding the perfect stock. It's not timing the market or discovering some ETF that nobody else knows about. In fact, in this phase, obsessing over your returns is one of the biggest traps you can fall into, because it distracts you from the only thing that actually matters right now. The uncomfortable truth is this. In the first 5 to 7 years, your savings rate matters more than your investment return, by a lot. Whether you are getting 5% or 10% barely changes how long it takes to hit $100,000. What changes it dramatically is how much you are putting in. That is it. That is the whole game at this stage. So the playbook is boring, and it works. First, you raise your income by any means necessary. Job hopping, side hustles, skills that make you harder to underpay, because you cannot save your way to $100,000 on a salary that doesn't leave room to breathe. Second, you freeze your lifestyle every time your income goes up. Every raise, every promotion, every side hustle dollar, if it goes straight into spending, you will always feel like you are behind, because you will be. The people who hit $100,000 fastest are the ones who get a raise and do not move into a nicer apartment. Third, you treat every windfall like a brick. Tax refund, bonus, birthday money, sold something on Facebook Marketplace. That money goes into the account, not into a vacation, not into a new gadget, into the pile you are building. Every brick matters more at this stage than it will ever matter again. This phase is not forever. That is the thing that keeps people going once they understand it. You are not signing up for a lifetime of sacrifice. You are signing up for a concentrated sprint, 3, 4, 5 years of living below your means, to build a foundation that will work for you for the next 5 decades. I want to leave you with something that actually helped me think about this differently. Most people frame their wealth journey as a straight line. You start at zero, you work, you save, you eventually get somewhere. And that framing makes the early years feel pointless because the line barely moves. But that is not what's actually happening. What you are building in those first years has nothing to do with the number on the screen. You are building the identity of someone who does not break under boredom. You are building the habit of living below your means before lifestyle creep gets its hands on you. You are learning how to stay in the market when it drops and your stomach tells you to pull everything out. By the time you hit $100,000, you are not just richer. You are fundamentally different. You have done the thing that 90% of people say they will do and never do. And then the math finally rewards you for it. The first $100,000 is brutal. It is supposed to be. It is the part of the race where most people drop out, which means if you finish it, you have already beaten the majority of the field. The million? That part is mostly patience. If you are in the grind right now, the early years, the low returns, the "is this even working" phase, this channel is for you. Not for people who already figured it out. For people who are figuring it out in real time, without a trust fund, without anyone in their family showing them how. Drop a comment and tell me where you are on this journey. Phase 1. Grinding toward $100,000. Already past it and feeling that shift. I read every single one. And if this gave you anything to think about, hit subscribe. We are just getting started.